Our first class of vertebrate chordates are the fish. As most of you know, fish are aquatic gill-breathing vertebrates. Okay, they usually have fins and scale-covered skin. We're going to look at them in two different groups. We have a superclass of jawless fish, superclass Agnatha, and we have a superclass of jawed fish, Gnathostomata. So let's take a look at our cladogram here, and what we're going to be doing, we're looking at these three groups right here. We're looking at fish without jaws, and we're looking at fish with jaws. Okay, so our class Agnatha, jawless fish, lampreys, and hagfish. These are jawless. They are eel-like. They have no paired appendages, no fins. They do have a cartilaginous skeleton. That's a more primitive condition. They have a two-chambered heart, and instead of having gills like you would think of, they have these pores right there. They have pore-like gills. They have a dorsal nerve cord, but no dermal scales. Okay, they do have the notochord that persists throughout the adult life, and they are either parasites or scavengers. They have external fertilization and separate sexes. They do have an ectoderm. Okay. Examples of organisms in this group are lampreys and hagfish. Take a look at this lamprey here. These are found in freshwater streams. They breed in freshwater streams. The adults actually swim in brackish water or marine environments. They remain a larva for 5 to 6 years. The larvae are filter feeders. And these are devastating to commercial fisheries. This is your lamprey right there. They are parasites right here. They have this oral disc right there and a rasping tongue that they use to suck blood. And bony fish typically are their prey. They have the ability to inject an anticoagulant to keep their prey's blood flowing. In the same group are the hagfish you see here. They feed on dead fish, annelids, mollusks, and crustaceans. They are scavengers. Something very interesting about the hagfish is when threatened, it has the ability to produce a mucus as a defense mechanism. And it's nasty. It's very nasty. They have the ability to produce lots and lots of mucus, half a liter within minutes of capture. I want to show you an example of the mucus or slime that the hagfish is able to produce. This video has no sound, but take a look at this. Within moments. That is a very effective defense mechanism. Our next group, Gnathostomata, are fish with jaws. They have jaws and paired appendages. The jaws are believed to have developed from that first pair of gill arches. They still have cartilaginous, most still have cartilaginous or bone, and most respire by gills. They do have various types of scales and slimy skin. We're going to talk more about that, but there's two classes of these. Okay, there are those that have cartilaginous skeletons, and then there are those that have bony skeletons. So we're going to take a look at both of those. The bony skeleton is the more advanced condition. Cartilaginous fish are more primitive. So our class chondrichthyes are the sharks, skates, rays, sawfish, and chimeras. These are jawed fish with cartilaginous skeletons. They are characterized by having a tail that is referred to as heterocercal. That's this example right here. It is unevenly balanced. It's longer at the top than the bottom. Hetero means different. So it's not balanced. It's not symmetrical. Okay. They have paired support fins. They have pectoral and pelvic fins. They do have something called a spherical right here. Well, there's your hetero and homocercal right there. We'll talk more about that later. That is a heterocercal. They do have something called placoid scales. These are scales that are different from the fish that we would find in our lakes and streams. They're made out of bone, and this is what they look like microscopically right there. They do have teeth that are also modified scales. They don't have lungs. They don't have a swim bladder, and we'll talk about what a swim bladder is in just a moment. Swim bladders are found in bony fish, okay? They have what is called a ventral mouth. Notice that it's on the underside of the animal right there. They have 5 to 7 pairs of gills and gill slits. They have a 2-chambered heart, as do all fish, and they have something called a lateral line. All fish have a lateral line. It's a sensory organ that would go the length of the fish, and it's a mechanoreceptor. It actually senses movement in the water. And they do have internal fertilization, which is something that is new. So cartilaginous skeleton, a heterocercal tails. They do have paired fins. Placoid scales, which we're going to talk about. That's different from the other type of scales. No lungs, no swim bladder, a ventral mouth, 5 to 7 pairs of gills, 2-chambered heart, lateral line system, and internal fertilization. Looking at the different fins, note that they do have pectoral fins right here. They have pelvic fins. They have dorsal fins. They have caudal fins, and they do have the gill slits, okay? Nostril right here, and a lateral line that goes the length of the organism. And again, that's a sensory organ. Most of you know that sharks are carnivores. I don't know if you realized it or not, but they have very poor vision. They depend on their sense of smell. They're olfactory, very efficient. And something very interesting is that the largest sharks are actually filter feeders. Also in this group are the skates and rays. You may be familiar with these. They are specialized. Their body, their morphology is specialized for bottom dwelling. They have those large, very large pectoral fins that are fused to their head right there. They look kind of like they're flying through the water. Their gill openings are actually on the underside of their head, and they prey on things like mollusks and crustaceans and small fish. There are things called electric rays that can discharge a current to stun their prey or deter predators. Here are some illustrations of manta rays. Some of these are actually filter feeders. And you may have heard of a stingray. Yes, not that stingray or that stingray, but this stingray with the whip-like tail that has the sawed edge and a venomous spine. Don't know if you've ever seen this strange-looking organism. This is a chimera. It's also in this group. It's kind of shark-like, but it's almost a cross between this group and the next group because it has some shark-like features and some bony fish-like features. They have these jaws right there that have that flat plate on them. The upper jaw is actually fused to their cranium, which is kind of strange, and they eat things like seaweed, mollusks, echinoderms, crustaceans, and fishes. The bony fish are ostisthes. They have bony skeletons. These are the fish that we're familiar with around here. They do have a homocercal tail right here. Notice homo means the same, so it's balanced, it's symmetrical. right there. They have something called a swim bladder, and some of them actually have lungs. This is characteristic of this group. Only this group has a swim bladder. Okay. They also have something called an operculum that covers their gills, and that is only found in this group. They also have a two-chambered heart. They also have the lateral line sensory organ. They have very, very well-developed vision, as those of you that are fisher people are probably well aware of. They have a terminal mouth instead of a ventral mouth. It's usually terminal, meaning it's at the end. They have external fertilization, and they have scales. We'll talk about their scales in just a moment. They're different from the placoid scales. They have an outer layer of calcium and an inner layer of connective tissue. So they're very different from the scales found in the other group. They do have gills. Let's talk about gills for just a moment. We've really not addressed that in detail. Most of you know that gills actually extract the dissolved oxygen from the water and excrete carbon dioxide. Okay, that's the purpose of the gill. Some of you may not be familiar with the fact that gills can actually work in air and lungs can work in water, but the efficiency is too low for survival. Okay, so fish have to stay in water to be able to extract enough oxygen to support their metabolism. They have something called a swim bladder. And with those with swim bladders, the water actually flows over the gills by the muscle contraction of the mouth. But if a fish doesn't have a swim bladder, there's nothing to cause the water to flow over the gills. So fish that don't have swim bladders must keep swimming for adequate water flow to go over the gills to extract the oxygen. When you are viewing the dissection of the perch, which is the fish that we'll be dissecting, one of the things that you'll need to identify is this swim bladder. Okay, the swim bladder is basically like an air balloon that the fish can control for buoyancy. When the fish wants to go vertically up and down in the water column, he or she will fill that swim bladder with air or release the swim bladder, the air out of the swim bladder, to be able to go up and down vertically. Kind of like if you're a scuba diver, it would be like a buoyancy compensator. It allows that organism to float up and down. If you have seen a fish, you may have seen the lateral line system, which appears as a line going down the body of the fish. This, again, is a sensory organ. It's a mechanoreceptor. It senses movement in the water, detects wave energy. Let's talk for a moment about osmoregulation. Keeping in mind that if you need to go back and review diffusion and osmosis from the chapters in 103, you might want to look at that. Osmoregulation is the control of internal salt concentrations. So if you are living in fresh water, you are going to have a greater concentration of salt within your body than outside the body. Okay, so there's going to be a tendency for the body to take up water. Water's going to want to go in where there is less concentration of water, more salt. So how does a fish that's living in fresh water control that? How do you control that? How do you maintain your internal salt concentration living in fresh water? Okay, so how the freshwater fish does it is the gills actively uptake salt from the environment. Okay, and the water is going to diffuse into the fish. So the fish has to take salt in. So the gills actively uptake salt. And the urine of these organisms is going to be very dilute. So they're trying to get rid of the water that is actively taken up by the body. So the secret to being a freshwater fish is to try to get rid of as much water as you can and take in salt so that you can maintain your internal salt concentration. So how would a saltwater fish do it? So if you are a saltwater fish or a marine fish, keep in mind that your external environment is going to have more salt than inside your body. So there's going to be a tendency for the water to want to go out of your body. Okay, so how are you going to maintain that internal osmotic concentration when the seawater, the salt water, has more salt than your body? How are you going to maintain the water? Okay, so what these do is they tend to lose water and gain salt. Okay, a marine fish is going to tend to want to lose water and gain salt. So how do they control that? That's the normal tendency. So what do you have to do? The fish actively excretes salt. Okay, it's in a salty environment, so its body is losing water. So it's going to actively excrete salt. It's drinking seawater, and its urine, remember now we're trying to maintain the water, we want to keep the water, the urine is very concentrated. Take a close look at the bony fish anatomy. These are the parts that you're going to be asked to identify during lab. You'll be able to see the swim bladder if you're very careful in your dissection. You obviously will be able to see the gills, and the covering that was over the gills that in this illustration has been cut off would have been the operculum. Okay, here's the stomach. Obviously here's the mouth. There's the heart. The heart's going to be very hard to see. It's very small and it's kind of tucked away right here. That organ right there is the liver. This is the intestine. It's going to go out into the anus. It's going to discharge any waste products there. This structure, which you may or may not see in dissection, is the kidney. And this large structure right here is going to be the gonad. Also in this group are the lobe-finned fish and the lungfish. There are actually 4 living species of these that have the paired limb-like fins with individual large bones, and they have lungs and gills. The lungfish actually gulps air into their lungs when the oxygen is poor in the water. They can live for long periods of time out of the water. And when threatened, they will burrow into the mud and secrete a slime that mixes with the mud that forms a cocoon to help them survive the dry season. You may have heard of the coelacanth. These were thought to be extinct and only as in the fossil record. One was actually caught in 1938. This is thought to be the connection between land animals and fish. Ray-finned fish are those that you are probably most familiar with. These are the fish that we catch around here. These are the fish that have the bony spines. Remember, they do have swim bladders and that homospherical tail that is symmetrical right here. These would be things like the sturgeon, paddlefish, bowfish, gar, and all of the modern fish. Here is a sturgeon and bowfin fish. And here are examples of your ray-finned fish.